Test, test.
Okay, what do we got here? Oh, our names are on it, look at that.
Good evening. No, we didn't order yet because I need a few more. And I need a few more and we'll order with one shot. Okay. Good evening, ladies.
Where do you want me to sit?
And everybody has with the names, so at the end,
I
you
like
can
it.
just give me back so I can recycle, save some trees.
Save
If
the
you don't
trees.
mind. Microphones are on, just to let you know.
Okay. They do weird in Boston. They have a February. She's a speech pathologist, so she's here until probably Sunday. And she'll take the train back.
I have extra copies in case.
That's awesome. I have most of the stuff you gave us.
I asked for it, yeah, for the large,
I have it, yes.
oh, good.
I think I have everything, I think, yeah.
Good evening. Yeah, this was distributed, but do you have it?
I think I have everything. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
See, I did, just in case. It's much better if you do.
So keep the same,
Yes.
same,
That would be great. Jason.
A nice big sheet of paper.
Yes, we're gonna call him, actually, John, I was hoping
yeah, he
John.
spoke with Jason, so it looks like he figured it out what to do.
He's gonna do it for YouTube?
Yeah, he's gonna do it on YouTube, but then we're gonna call him right now, actually. Let's see. I'm sure John will be here. Let's see, Tree.
Hello. Good, how about
No,
yourself?
I asked about FaceTime, and they said no to FaceTime, so YouTube is the way to watch the video.
What is it, 0 or 1?
Try, you shouldn't need any but try one, so in case something, I don't have access to it, so Dimitri has a turn here, so he's IT department, so you can so I can contact them,
All right,
because it's done actually.
because
Dimitri, how are you?
the March 5th meeting. I
Jason
didn't
Burkle,
need it
how are
because
you?
I'm having hip surgery next week, and I don't think I'm gonna be
Yeah,
able to
John's
drive. Now, my
John's not
husband has
here
volunteered
yet.
to
I'm gonna
drive me,
move the
but
phone over to where John is sitting,
Yes.
so that he can put it
I'm
under the
gonna see how I
microphone
feel,
right
and that will
there.
determine if I physically come.
And I think
Yes.
you're set, so I'm just gonna confer with Marty for a second here.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I'm actually so ready, because, yeah, and I will say, it's almost like once
obviously,
they
of course,
said
that is
they
for our conversation.
skyrocketed,
That's
and all of a
there.
sudden, I wish I was kidding me,
Oh, yeah, it's right.
but yeah.
Okay,
So-
and then down here, so please have your first,
Yes.
provide testimony
You know, the
regarding-
anxiety, exactly, and last year,
Mr.
like, my hysterectomy did not go as planned, he was crazy, my husband was like, look, if it's gonna be another hearing setback, if for some reason it takes long,
Hello.
you have to get me in.
Great, how are you?
Cause last year it just took
Yes,
long.
thank you.
wasn't
We're
a
gonna
big
ask for
deal,
your feedback on some of these. Okay.
because she said 90 minutes is all we have.
Okay, perfect.
For the operating room, and it was like 5 hours, and he was like, where is he? They had to cut me like, we weren't prepared for that, we thought it was either or, and for me it was both, because they couldn't do it. Well, yeah, and I had no clue. What is going on? Am I being muted? Yeah.
Michelle Brielle here, I saw it.
Your husband said you can't come home. I'm like, he did? And then I felt it. I was like, what the hell? So he's, I said, I don't think I could ever tackle this kind of thing. This is so much. It's very.
Try to get Michelle on first before we go into
How are you?
Gotcha, okay.
on traffic.
Michelle to consult.
Groundhog Day. Hey, Rena. How's it going, Jean? Good to see you.
Okay. Can't complain too much.
Now, so Colliers has a traffic expert for us, so we want to get her done before tonight. So we may cut off the objector.
Yes.
And then bring the engineer back. Okay.
Is he okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
So depending on how long he has to cross. Well,
Around 9:30, yeah.
we don't want anybody to think, okay, let's just go and see what's.
So are we changing the order? Is it the engineer first?
I'll help you with it. We'll definitely do his engineer.
Engineer first,
Introduce
then,
the
then,
changes.
then cross-examine, and then the traffic, and then before we get to cross-examine on traffic, we're gonna have Michelle provide her.
So we may not do any questions from the objectors.
Okay.
Of anybody until we get engineer done, traffic done, and then our traffic done.
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
you'll come back.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let the other attorney know that, just so he's not.
I told him
But he doesn't know about our traffic. You don't, yeah, you don't know.
Well, it's too bad there's not a way to zoom in on this thing.
Oh, can you see us right now?
Yeah, I see you
You should be
perfectly.
able to see
Okay,
us.
okay. We have a full house. I don't know if you can see the full house too.
Yeah, I see two people missing.
Oh no, I'm talking about the audience too.
Oh,
Can you see the, you can't see the audience?
no, I only see straight ahead. I see from the second row forward,
Okay.
like that lady walking by. I see from her forward and just sat down.
Yeah, okay.
But it's okay. You know, I have all the
Good.
paperwork here, so when they return a document, I'll come up over here.
All right. How you doing? Good, how you doing? Good to see you.
See you.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. All right, so what are we?
How'd we do with the interviews?
We're doing
Well,
the engineer
we selected
first, then we'll have the plaintiff question across the engineer, then the traffic coordinator, and then before we have the plaintiff across the traffic coordinator, we're gonna have Michelle Brielle from Colliers explain share with us her traffic report, her traffic study. And then the plaintiff, hopefully we don't go past 9 or 9:30.
Well, at some point we'll cut it off. We'll give it a new date, obviously.
Yeah, but now it's gonna be noisy.
Yep, I got that on the list here. Minutes, we're gonna actually, if there's any changes, January 8th and February 5th,
Yes.
right? Yep, I got that on here.
Please,
Yep.
thank you.
I have my Robert's rules.
Because planning board, I have everything posted already, and we are a little behind here, so I don't wanna be.
Yeah, hopefully we fly back through that quickly. So
Yeah.
6:59, so we're just possibly John. And we get any text from John here? I'm gonna just text him real quick. See
Usually
what,
rolls in last.
yeah, him and I both. We're the New York commuters. John.
You got here earlier.
No, yeah, you know what? It's the congestion that's working out well, but you know what? They're reversing that now. Because the traffic into the city has been phenomenal.
I don't
Phenomenal.
think
Yeah.
they're gonna be able to do it. It's amazing.
I hope it's so beautiful. I get in 50 minutes. 50 minutes.
Even in Hoboken, just
Yeah.
around there.
Yeah, it's.
I think John's gonna come.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
Well,
actually
they're,
texting him right now.
Just
New
so
York's
you know,
fighting
he's
the,
late 'cause he thinks a bus is
Well, that's it. Came out today. That Trump's going to try and reverse it.
well, I know that, but the Governor Hochul was also going to sue.
Yeah,
Okay.
the fight is-
Not to allow.
Okay, good,
Right.
good, good. Yeah, no, I mean,
How many lawsuits there are?
but honest to God, the commuting back and forth.
It's a good time to be a lawyer, right?
Amazing.
Because of that.
It's incredible. It's like 45, 50 minutes into the city. No, there's no cars on the road. It's all buses. Yeah, it's amazing.
You're in favor of it,
Oh, totally.
for selfish purposes.
I mean, even if the bus,
For environmental purposes.
hey, even if they raise your fare $2 or $3, right? It'd be worth it.
Exactly. No, I agree.
I pay it I think it's worth it.
I mean, I was
pay for
an hour and a
convenience,
half, an hour and a half sometimes
I
in the
know.
old days. Yeah, an hour and a half to get into the city.
Every other aspect in our lives, we pay for convenience.
How long do you
I'm
want to
willing to pay the extra money.
Not that much.
It saves me, like you said, at least an hour. Each way, so it's 2 hours a day. Then I'm not in the car and sitting in traffic.
And I hit this first.
If it's quiet.
Do you drive in or you take the bus?
I drive in because I'm at different locations every day. Not every day. Never in one location.
So that's.
Oh, yeah,
can't
that's
take-
better, yeah.
I could, but it would be, I would have to join another meetings otherwise, so I would have
This
to
is
take
our
subway or cab or
I
bus.
think we started off with the three
Vicinity
spots.
work.
Yes, Dimitri.
For the most part, though, I'm in Midtown.
Yeah.
You want to make a comment that he's officially on the meeting, even if it's always moving forward?
Still, I can
Yeah,
do the roll call.
when he does the roll call, he'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm gonna put your speaker there. Oh, you'll share the speaker, the microphone. Yeah, oh, there's a four? Oh, wow.
No, roll call, I do it.
Yep. All right, I guess, 7:01, what do you think? Wait a minute. Yeah, I know. Dimitri stopped doing that while ago. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Homedale Zoning Board meeting. I hereby call the February 19th, 2025 Zoning Board meeting to order. Irina, can you do the roll call, please?
Oh, do you have to?
In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10-4-10, and the regulations governing remote meetings, NJAC 539 1-5, I hereby announce that adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting was provided in a notice dated January 14th, 2024, that was sent to the Asbury Park Press, Two River Times, posted on the bulletin board and on the main access door to Town Hall, filed in the clerk's office, and posted on the township's website, www.homedaletownship.com.
Irina, can you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Berkeley,
Present.
Ms. Campus,
Present.
Ms. Gerhart,
Present.
Mr. Giampolo,
Present.
Mr. Luciani,
Here.
Mr. Ofranitopoulos.
Here,
So do you,
Just for the record, Dimitri's attending by telephone, so we have to make sure we speak up a little bit when he's talking.
Thank you.
Dimitri, can you hear everyone?
yeah, mostly.
Okay, so we got you in there. Okay, good.
Mr. Marzocca,
Here,
Ms. Costello, Mr. Frigiola. Absent. Thank you.
Can I ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence for our military, police, and first responders? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go look over the approval of minutes from the last two meetings. Was everyone able to further review the minutes of January 8th, 2025 and February 5th, 2025? Were there any edits, changes, or questions about those minutes? No. Okay. If there are none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
All motion to approve the minutes.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Just for clarification, are we approving both of them together or one at a time?
What do you think, Marty?
If everyone's eligible, same people, we can do it both.
No, they're not, so unfortunately we
individually.
have to do separate.
January 8th, 2025.
Eligible to vote. Mr. Berkeley,
Yes.
Ms. Campus,
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart,
Yes.
Mr. Giampolo,
Yes.
Mr. Luciani,
Yes.
Mr. Marzocca,
Yes.
Mr. Orfanidopoulos,
Yes.
Ms. Costello. Thank you.
Can I have a vote on the February 5th, 2025 meeting minutes?
Motion to accept the meetings.
Second.
Eligible to vote, Mr. Berkeley,
Yes.
Ms. Campus,
Yes.
Ms. Gerhart,
Yes.
Mr. Giampolo,
Yes.
Mr. Luciani,
Yes.
Mr. Orfanidopoulos,
Yes.
Ms. Costello. Minutes for February 5th and January 8th, 2025 have been passed successfully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one item on the agenda for today's meeting, so let's get started. Francine, can you please read the first item?
Okay. Zoning Board of Adjustment, number 1. Zoning Board of Adjustment 2023-10, Andrews Management Corp., LLC, 125-127, Red Hill Road, Block 21, Lot 4 and 4.01, R40A zone, D1 use variance, bifurcated application seeking a D1 use variance to construct 2 3-story medical office buildings in the R40A residential zone.
Thank you, Francine. Mr. Fieri, would you like to give us a recap? It's been a while since we've
Yeah.
last heard your testimony of the prior 3 meetings testimony.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. I'm not sure if you want counsel for the objector to enter appearance now. Well,
When you're finished with your
okay.
intro.
So just by way of introduction, we were here September 4th, is the first hearing. At that time, the applicant testified and our civil engineer testified. There was no cross-examination at that meeting. On September 18th, our engineer came only to testify, and there was no cross-examination. On December 4th, our traffic expert, John Ray, testified. Cross-examination began but was not completed. The board at that meeting had requested that he provide a copy of his gap study that he referred to during the course of his testimony. Subsequent to the December 4th meeting, the gap study was provided and revised engineering plans were submitted. That was on January 28th. So we then received new reports from Colliers, December 10th, and February 10th, and Kate, February 12th. And so that brings us to tonight. I understand that the procedure for tonight is going to be that we're going to bring our engineer up to provide testimony to discuss the plan changes. We're going to bring our traffic engineer up to discuss his gap study, and then we're going to open up for cross-examination of either or both witnesses, and hopefully get over that.
After our traffic. person.
After your professionals, yes. Thank you. So that's our introduction. That brings us up to where we are tonight.
Please. Objector's counsel is going to just put an appearance in for the record.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is John Kaplan. I'm from Herald Law in Warren Township, New Jersey. Here on behalf of the Urbanski family at 121 Red Hill Road in Homedale.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's, just as the beginning of the year, I want to swear everybody in again. So for our professionals, and we'll start with your engineer as well now. Everyone just raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give for this application is the truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
For the record, the board's traffic engineer also was sworn in at the same time. We'll have you introduced later on tonight. Thank you.
And Mike here, since there's one member on the phone, you make sure you speak right into that microphone. Would you reintroduce yourself to the board? And there might be some new board members too, so. But we don't need to requalify him because he's already been accepted.
Sure. My name is Michael Wesolowski. I'm a principal engineer with Short Point Engineering. It's my name. I signed the provided use variance plan.
And to remind the board, this is a bifurcated application, so it's not fully engineered. We're just seeking use variance for now. And Mike, your office prepared the plan that was submitted on January 28th, the revised plan?
Correct.
Okay. Would you summarize do you have an exhibit to show the board?
I do.
Why don't we
we can have him start, I'll figure it out, or after, while you start. So, yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the exhibit that you see before you, which we'll mark in the record momentarily, is an updated colorized version of the revised use variance plan that was recently submitted to your attention. The exhibit is titled Site Rendering 125 127 Red Hill Road, stated today, February 19th, 2025. I'll walk you through the revisions as they were made in the plan that was submitted and the rendering that you see before you. So first we made a few small shifts in a few site elements. The first being we took the entire layout, in the buildings, the
John,
sidewalk.
we need the mic close to him.
Yeah, right there, this one. Yeah.
Testing.
Sounds good.
So the first of those shifts being the buildings, the sidewalk, the parking, the drive aisles. Those were shifted in a southwest direction, approximately 5 feet away from the parkway right-of-way. Next, the two buildings by themselves were shifted an additional 5 feet in that same direction. Finally, I'll say approximately the upper or northeast half, 2/3 of the site was shifted an additional 6 feet, and one of the effects of that was that the area reserved for bioretention basin 1 shrunk slightly, and 3 parking spaces in that perimeter were lost. Now, as a result of all those shifts, the two buildings themselves are now 16 feet further away from the parkway right-of-way. And notwithstanding Ms. Keller's testimony that the individual bulk variances may not technically be required here, one of the benefits of that is where a 50-foot front yard setback was required to the parkway, previously 44 feet was proposed, now 60 feet is proposed, removing the need for any such variance. Now, the main benefit and the reason for these shifts was to address probably one of the main comments, to shift the septic fields for each building from their previous location, which was adjacent to the southwest or bottom property line, away from that property line. And as you can see, we've relocated those as far away in the opposite direction as possible so that they're between the two buildings and the parkway right-of-way. Bearing in mind the required dimensional setbacks of those septic fields themselves, we are maintaining 10 feet required to the property line and 15 feet required to the buildings. Typically, that dimension is 25 feet in a scenario where you have a building that doesn't have a basement, where it's a slab-on-grade construction, as these would be. That dimension can be reduced to 15 feet.
And those are the two circles on that diagram, right?
The two
yep.
rectangles.
Two right, okay.
Right, they're still green, so they're maybe a little hard to see from here. But
Okay.
Okay, then the next revision we focused on was we had discussed reducing the parking and really focusing on removing the spaces that were in close proximity to the adjoining residential areas. So those are really 3 areas. First, we had removed the spaces in this vicinity immediately northwest of Building A. That was 20 spaces. Next, we removed the group of 24 spaces that was in this vicinity, the most northwestern area of the site. And then finally, we had removed the row of 38 spaces along the southwestern property line that were parallel with both that line and the drive aisle. So, including the removal of those spaces, the 3 I had mentioned that were lost surrounding the bioretention area, and I believe 2 more in the perimeter of the remaining parking, we had a net reduction in parking from the previously proposed 199 spaces to now 108 spaces. Bearing in mind that 108 includes 4 electric vehicle spaces, which are allowed to be credited as 2 each. Then at the building square footage totaling 29,760 square feet, that provides a ratio of 3.63 spaces per 1,000 square feet of building area. Along the lines of all the parking reduction you see, that associated to a reduction of lot coverage. Previously 37% 8%, I believe, was proposed, whereas in the zone, 25% is typically required. We are now proposing 26%, so a substantial reduction, but still a nonconformity given the zone. Finally, a few other minor revisions that were made to address comments by the board. We had added an ambulance drop-off area, which is indicated immediately between buildings A and B that could be shared by both buildings as needed. Second, while it's not shown here on this colorized rendering, it was indicated on the use variance plan that was resubmitted, that being the water services for the project. So those would come in connecting to the existing New Jersey American Main on the opposite side of Red Hill Road. That tap would be made and the services would come in the eastern property corner and then would enter what we refer to in the industry as a hot box, which is an above ground heated structure where some of the mechanical equipment is enclosed. That would be situated approximately here. And then the services would circulate to the site, feed the buildings, and any hydrants that would be required. And finally, given the additional reductions of impervious surface and parking areas, we have a result of increased buffers to both the north and west. First, focusing on lot depth or the property line to the north, we had previously testified that the required buffer was calculated to be 133.6 feet. The new resulting buffers or distances to that northern property line are 279.9 feet to the nearest corner of building A, 252.8 feet to what is now the nearest structure or impervious surface, being the trash enclosure. Then focusing on the buffer to lot width or the buffer to the southwest, the bottom of your plan. We had previously testified that the required buffer was calculated to be 61.2 feet. We're now providing 79.2 feet from that southwestern property line to the adjacent parallel drive aisle. And the key benefit there is now that with the relocation of the septic fields, we're able to provide a fully landscaped and berming screen to, again, screen the proposed development from the adjacent property. That summarizes the revisions made to the revised plan.
Just one follow-up. Again, the buffers you've described, et cetera, they're all conceptual, and if the board were to grant the use variance, we'd be back with site plan approval with far more detail on the type of planting, et cetera. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But it would be substantially similar to what you've just showed represented to the board.
Yes. Yes.
That's all we have to summarize the changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. We're going to invite.
Do more questions.
Okay. He's going to wait till okay. All right, so we'll open up to the board if you have any questions of the engineer on the changes to the site plan.
I just want a clarification. You mentioned something about the septic being away from the buildings. If it doesn't have a basement, it's one thing, and if it does, could you just repeat what that was?
So the requirements from the septic rules, the state septic rules, give a range and a variety of dimensions from one structure to another. In this case, we're talking about our septic fields. Now, if you have a typical building where a lot of times you have a septic field, you're doing a house, the house has a basement, that separation distance is required to be 25 feet. In this case, these buildings will not have basements. They'll be what we call slab-on-grade foundation type. In that instance, you're allowed to reduce that separation to 15 feet. That's what we're holding here. Give or take an additional couple feet.
Another question. You didn't mention anything about ADA compliance spaces. You mentioned about electrical vehicles.
Those are indicated on the proposed plan to meet the ADA regs. They are immediately fronting both buildings.
How many parking spaces are you having now?
108.
108. Okay, so not 190, but 108. Okay.
I have another question. You mentioned that your detention basin is shrunk from previous. What ramifications of that? What were you required? Why did you have it?
At this stage, we don't see any ramifications, particularly given the reduction in impervious surface. It was a minute reduction in square footage of that basin area. compared to the impervious surface that we lost, it's probably a net gain of storage volume for the site, relatively speaking.
Do we have any other questions from the board? No, go ahead, no, go ahead. Oh, Dimitri, Francine has one more too.
I'll keep you busy.
Okay.
That hot box you're talking about, what does that look like? Is that an unsightly looking structure? What does it look like?
Generally is, and it's unfortunate that in many circumstances it is required. It's a large, generally metallic above-ground enclosure that unfortunately is required to be in the front of the site by New Jersey American Water. So we would ensure that we provide adequate screening around that structure.
Dimitri, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, the rear of the property that's listed as a landscape and buffer area, what will the surface be? Will that be a grass that's going to be maintained, or is it going to be left wild? And then part two of the question would be, can the applicant stipulate or a special condition that there would be no more additional buildings put on the property at any future time?
To answer part one of that question, I know in the rendering you see here, it's left kind of untouched. That was intended to convey that there's no need at this time to provide anything in that area. It could be left as is. It could receive additional plantings as the board may request. To answer part two of that question, I would defer
To answer your second part, it's impossible to say what will happen in the future. I think we could clearly state that nothing else can be put on this property until we come back to the board with an amended use variance and site plan application. But 5-10 years from now, if there's a need for more medical and it could work, we may want to do that. It's hard to predict.
Yeah, but, and Sal, anything in the future
Has to come
would
back
have
to
to come back to the board, to the zoning board.
To the zoning board,
So
yes.
it really is, if the board were to approve this and were to approve a site plan, that would be inherent in the approval. So, you know, you would, they could always.
You may not have her mic on, I can't hear it too
Oh,
good.
I'm sorry, Dimitri, it's Kate. Sorry, I was just saying that, yeah, I didn't realize no, I can hear it much better now. I was just saying that, you know, if the board were to approve this, if they were to approve the site plan down the line, anything would have to come back to this board, whether it was an expansion of this use or a proposed of something for another use. So, you know, that I think overrides the potential for having a condition, because a relief a condition, you have to come to the board, but having to come for a use variance would override anything.
Other question. You said that the hot box structure would be, would have screening. What exactly did you mean by screening? You said that the hot box structure would have screening. What exactly did you mean by that, screening?
So our intent would be to provide of adequate height evergreen screening so that it's generally out of view. And if also desired, it can also have the evergreen screening and a fence. The fence and etc. isn't all that different from the enclosure itself, so the evergreen screening may be sufficient.
Evergreen, okay.
And John, you'll get a chance at a site plan hearing if this bifurcated use is approved. But you'll have more detail at that time.
Absolutely.
And Mike, those come, I know you just said sometimes can be metallic, but they're also sometimes available in neutral colors, green. I have one town that requires them in green, that might be a little onerous, but there are options for screening that can be done.
Yes, I think that makes sense given how often they're required.
And they're required right in the front.
Actually, the site plan visit, should we talk about that now? Scheduling the site plan.
Go to
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, what we're gonna say, if there's no more board questions, we're gonna move to the professionals
Okay.
next.
Thank
So
you.
Kate, if there's no more questions, please go ahead, Kate.
Sure. I just wanted to, you know, we noted the reduction in parking that was proposed here. I think that we had heard testimony on that at prior meetings. We had acknowledged that there technically is not a parking standard for this use. However, it is all part of the overall review of the use variance. So, you know, I think that we welcome the idea of having less coverage on this site. Even if the variance is not technically required, but we always welcome that, especially in this type of environment where you're on septic, et cetera. We noted in our letter that, you know, it might be a potential for banked parking on the site, because what the number of spaces that's proposed here, I don't remember the exact ratio offhand, but it is substantially less than what is required in the M medical zone in town. So the applicant the applicant's professionals gave testimony at prior hearings, you know, based on the usage at medical offices in Homedale. I know that the applicant's principal also operates medical offices around the state, so I think that that was part of their argument for reducing the parking. But at the same time, it is substantially lower. So we mentioned in our letter that that could be a potential for, you know, some certain amount of bank parking to be approved as part of this. And I think this is something that would be reviewed as part of the use variance plan, because it affects the site layout in such an such a kind of overall way. So that said, do you have any idea of where that could potentially go on the site? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. We
Okay.
had reviewed that comment, and our first thoughts would be to introduce, I would say, the majority of, depending on what number we feel is comfortable in the long run, where I had mentioned the loss of 20 spaces adjacent to Building A and 24 at the northwesternmost area of the site. Those are the first two areas that we would seek to reintroduce as banked parking, to purposely not reintroduce the row adjacent to that southwest property line.
Okay, yeah, and do you have any idea about, you know, what your estimate of how many spaces you could potentially do over there? 'Cause I don't think we'd be looking to have the total, you know, maybe 199, but just an idea.
Yeah, again, we had lost in this area, it was 20, in this area it was 24. So we're able to bank however many we feel as
As of that,
you,
okay.
the professionals feel is appropriate to reserve.
Okay, and I'll leave the rest to our engineering consultants, but that was in my letter, so I wanted to address it on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Mr. White, do you have any questions?
I think all my questions have been asked already.
Okay. That being the case, we're going to have Mr. Kaplan. Do you want to come on?
Well, all right, so with your consent, we've agreed, unless you want to change it, to let him go right to his traffic, reserving your rights to do all question of the engineer from prior and today. And then when traffic's finished, we may get our traffic person just to get that finished tonight. And then obviously you're free to cross all his professionals however long you need to after that. We're not trying to cut you off. We're just trying to get our traffic person who's here special for us tonight. But she can't go until they finish up. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't hear? Sorry. So, Sal, you're good to bring up your next witness.
We'll call John Ray.
Hey, John, just, John, because it's a new year, we'll swear you in. Just, do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and you've already been accepted as a traffic expert.
Thank you.
John, after the last hearing, and as you indicated, as I indicated at the beginning, at the introduction and the summary of where we left off, course examination had started with you, but you were referring to a gap study that you had agreed to provide to the board. That gap
Just gonna
study.
have to speak closer to the mic.
Okay, and that gap study is dated January 21st,
2025, correct.
2025. So that's the only new traffic data that you submitted to the board.
Correct.
All right, so would you summarize for the board, and I know you discussed the gap study, but now that they have the report to review, can you discuss that with the board, how you used it and what your conclusions were?
Sure. Well, just to go back over what was initially presented to the board during my previous testimony.
And John, I just wanted, Sal, I was up to A4. I don't know if you've had that. So before we get too far out, we should mark that as. I have A3 up to A3. Yeah, okay, so we'll mark that as A4 just for the record.
Oh.
Sorry.
The exhibits may need to be
Okay. We'll
redone.
correct it if we're wrong.
Okay, so I originally prepared a full traffic impact study dated December 8th, 2023.
5. Correct that, A5.
And included in that traffic study was a gap study that I conducted on Red Hill Road at the site of the proposed driveway. And I concluded that there were more than adequate gaps, substantially more gaps that were necessary in order to get our left turns out of the site during the critical afternoon peak hours when traffic exiting the site and the traffic volumes on Red Hill Road would be at a maximum. But since some time had passed since that gap study, which was done back in November of 2023, I wanted to update the data. I wanted to get a little bit more current data, so we went back. We did an additional gap study last fall. The gap study was done on Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, and I can report that the results of the gap study that we did in 2024 were very similar to the original gap study. From 3 to 4 p.m., which was the lowest number of gaps that we recorded. We actually did the gap study from 3 to 6 p.m., and the 3 to 4 p.m. time period was the time period when there were the fewest gaps, and there still were 87 gaps over 8 seconds in length, and a lot of those gaps were substantially in excess of 8 seconds. Some of them were in the teens and in the 20s. And the reason why I bring this up is because once you have a gap of, let's say, 17, 20 seconds, you can get multiple cars out of the driveway during that bigger gap. But at the end of the day, the result of the gap study is that there are more than sufficient gaps to safely get left turns and right turns out of the proposed site driveway. That's really the only additional information I have to provide.
Since the parking number, and I know you provided this testimony previously, but since the parking ratio has gone down to 3.6 and change, can you just provide some testimony to support
Yes.
that reduction?
I forgot about that. And one of the items in the Collier's report that they've asked for is the backup data. At the last meeting, I had testified as to some parking studies we had conducted here at medical office buildings here in Holmdel Township. And I had testified that we found the maximum parking ratio that we recorded was, I think, 3.3 parked cars per 1,000 square feet at any of the 6 sites that we took a look at. And so the ratio that we're providing here is in excess of what we found was necessary at those other medical office buildings here in Holmdel. We believe it'll be sufficient, but as our engineer, Mr. Wesolowski, testified to just a few minutes ago, there is room to bank some additional parking if the board and the board's experts feel it's necessary to provide some additional parking. We believe the ratio that's provided will be adequate. The only other thing I would add to that is that in terms of how many more additional spaces we might need to bank, I took a look at the Institute of Transportation Engineers' latest edition of the Parking Generation Manual, and if we use the 85th percentile peak parking ratio that the ITE reported for medical office buildings, we would need approximately, in order to meet that ratio, we would need about 137 parking spaces. So we would need about roughly 29, 30 more banked parking spaces, should that be the direction that the board wants us to go to. Again, we don't think we need them, but in order to reach that number, and I think that number was also in the Collier's report, they kind of recommended that as long as we could meet the 85th percentile peak parking ratio that the ITE presented in their data, that they'd be comfortable with it.
Okay, so do you have any more testimony to provide?
No, I know Michelle had some comments in her report, so we
Well, I
can
think
let her.
we'll open up to board questions first and
Okay.
invite Michelle up second.
Okay.
Anyone from the board have any questions for the?
Yeah, I noticed most of the traffic projections were for no-bill situations. Now, we know that there's some predicted bills on the Middletown side. How does that impact your traffic study if in fact some of those bills occur?
Well, I looked into that, and there was a proposal for 70 townhomes on the opposite side of Red Hill Road on the Middletown property. My understanding, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that has not been approved, and it is in litigation. So the proper protocol in the traffic engineering industry is to take into account projects that are approved. So hopefully if that project goes forward, they include our traffic. That would be the protocol. They're not approved, it's in litigation. The only thing I can tell you is the addition of, in my estimation, the addition of 70 townhomes on that property would not impact the gap studies that I've done. There will still be plenty of gaps for our traffic to get out safely. So I have considered it, but it's not included in any of the data because it's not approved, it's in litigation, and I'm just following protocol.
Yeah, another thing I noticed is that there's you have 2 lanes coming out of the property. I don't know how far back those 2 lanes go. Before you get to those 2 lanes, there's a section, there's obviously only 1 lane into that. Would either of these 2 lanes be backed up with cars so that so that you'd have cars backed up on the on the
Internally.
internally?
Okay. If you give me 1 second to look at the queue analysis from the printouts, I can hopefully answer that question. It looks like the 95th percentile queue length, which is what we use, would be 1 vehicle, so it shouldn't be an issue. It looks like we can hold about 3 cars in the left turn lane and 2 cars in the right turn lane, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Any other questions from the board? Go ahead.
You need a mic.
I think,
Is that better? Okay. Was any other day reviewed, or was it just the
Well,
September 17th day?
the other day, we did do a count back in November of 2023. We did a supplemental gap study, and actually, the supplemental gap study that I did back in 2023 was also in addition to traffic counts that I conducted for the, so there were actually, if I'm not mistaken, give me a chance. There were 4 days we actually collected traffic volume data. Back in September, no, 3 days. Back in September of 2023, on September 14th, then we did the follow-up gap study on November 16th, 2023, and then the last gap study was done September 17th, 2024. So we actually collected traffic volume data on 3 separate days. The only other thing I would add to the situation is I've been out to the site numerous occasions during the afternoon peak hour, the last of which was this afternoon, to sit there and watch the traffic flow during the afternoon peak hour to make sure that the data we collected was modeled correctly, and I could see the gaps that were produced in the gap study, and I can testify to the board the gaps are there.
And was the morning peak hour reviewed at all, or solely the afternoon?
The morning peak hour was not for 2 reasons. Number one, the traffic volumes on Red Hill Road were lower during the morning peak hour than they were during the afternoon peak hour. And the second part of that equation is we generate more exiting traffic during the afternoon peak hour than during the morning peak hour. During the morning peak hour, it would be mostly arrivals to the site. The afternoon peak hour would be departures. So the combination of higher exiting traffic and higher traffic volumes on Red Hill Road would cause us to, to know that the critical peak hour was the afternoon peak hour.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? If not, I'd like to invite Michelle Brioff from Colliers
Sure.
to share any questions.
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself real quick. Michelle Bryhoff from Colliers Engineering and Design. I'm a principal associate there. I manage the traffic planning division. I have been involved with and reviewed dozens and dozens of applications just like this. So I will go ahead and get started. I did review Mr. Ray's, both of his reports that he provided, the original report in 2023, as well as the most recent report that he provided with the gap analysis, January 21st, 2025. I do agree with his findings from a traffic methodology perspective. He followed the protocols as far as the trip generation, the capacity analysis. One of the things we did comment in our letter was about the parking. I do feel as though with the additional, I believe it was 44 land bank spaces that they are potentially able to provide. That would bring their number up to that 85th percentile ITE parking generation. So I am comfortable with the proposed parking supply with the addition of those land bank spaces being closest to that ITE number. I would request just a copy of the parking studies that they did do at those 6 sites, just so we can review that and have some level of comfort. The only other thing that I will comment on, and I know this is going to be part of the site plan application as well as the county review, is just the site distance on Red Hill Road. At the location of the driveway, you have a little bit of a vertical and horizontal deflection. I know Mr. Ray mentioned in his report that there would be a site triangle easement and some clearing that would need to take place, but again, that would be probably part of the site plan application. So that would really be my one concern is the site distance at that location.
And we concur that we need to get a site triangle on the opposite side of the road. I did testify at the last meeting as to the need for the site triangle, and we concur we need to get it.
And just in response to the request for the parking data that John referred to, he handed me his report from June of 2023, which I'll send to the board and to Michelle and the board professionals directly, because we only have the one copy, and council, of course,
Okay.
after tonight.
All the data that's been requested is in that report.
So the 6 Homedale sites are?
Yes.
Okay.
And that study was requested by my client in order to make sure that he was going to provide the proper number of parking spaces for this project. So that was something that we went out and we did before we even made an application to the board, just to make sure that when the site plan, the conceptual site plan was developed, we had enough parking.
Okay. Any questions from the board for Michelle? All right, none being seen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite up John Kaplan to ask questions of both the engineer and our traffic consultant.
Well, one at a time.
If it's okay.
Yeah, I think the engineer first. We're going to do the
I was
engineer.
going to say, I'm here,
Yeah.
you might as well do me first, but that's okay.
Well, before you leave, John, do you have a sense who you may take longer with?
Certainly the engineer.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
do-
All right.
If we can finish Mr. Ray, then he won't have to come back, possibly.
I'm fine with whatever
Either way.
Mr. Kaplan wants to do.
Except that the public has a chance.
Public,
Right.
right, you're right, never mind. So you do.
You're coming back either way.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Yep.
Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen of the board. John Kaplan.
Use the microphone, please.
That one's live.
John Kaplan again from Herald Law in Warren Township, New Jersey, on behalf of neighboring property owners. As the board is aware, our office did start conducting cross-examination of Mr. Ray, I believe back in December. So with the additions, and to conclude that cross-examination, start with Mr. Ray right now. Did you, in your analysis, perform any traffic analysis, provide any report as to the traffic on the MSK site?
Yes.
Needs to be closer to the mic.
And did you provide anything to the board with regard to that study?
Yes, that was included in my original traffic study of December 8th, 2023. We looked at the impact that this project would have at the signalized intersection where the Garden State Parkway ramp comes off at exit 114 opposite the MSK driveway. And based on that study, we concluded that we would not have a significant impact on the operation of the traffic signal. There would be very minimal increases in delay, no decrease to the level of service, and no significant impact. It's in the traffic study.
And I know you just testified about the 70 townhouse units that are in litigation. And is that the only application approval, residential, non-residential, in the area that you're aware of?
That I'm aware of.
And you're not aware of anything
In the immediate vicinity of the site, no.
And did you do any OPA requests for police reports on Red Hill Road?
No.
And what about the intersection of Red Hill Road, Garden State Parkway, and MSK vicinity?
No.
So you're not familiar with any accidents or safety issues in that area?
He has to talk closer to the mic, Jason.
He's, I mean, I think it's that other microphone might be better.
Well,
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm talking louder? Okay. That's part of my nature, I guess.
We switched microphones, Dimitri.
So that's the same for speeding tickets as well? You haven't performed any study on that?
No.
So if you're making a left-hand turn from the site, into the site from Red Hill Road, in your opinion, is this a dangerous condition making that left-hand turn?
The sight distance for the left turn movement into the driveway is good, so that's not an issue. My expectation is that should we get the use variance from this board and we proceed to site plan and we proceed to get a Monmouth County Planning Board approval, they are probably going to require a left turn lane, which will require some widening on Red Hill Road. So the answer to that question is my expectation is we're going to provide a left turn lane on Red Hill Road and it will be safe.
And what about that with for now, the lack of the site triangle?
Well, there's no traffic now, so that my testimony is that before we generate any traffic to Red Hill Road, we have to have the site triangle.
So that site triangle would be important to this application, correct, in the use of this property?
It's a safety issue. It's important to any application, yes.
And was that lot part of your application?
Not part of this application, no.
And you're not aware of the proposed tenants in the site, so you have no idea the frequency of delivery trucks, garbage trucks, size, et cetera?
Oh, no, I'm familiar with medical office buildings. We've probably done 50 studies for medical office buildings over the years. And for the most part, no tractor-trailer traffic. A lot of UPS trucks, FedEx trucks, box trucks that deliver medical supplies, things of that nature.
So based on those studies, a facility of this size, do you have an idea of how often we're going to get deliveries, garbage trucks, et cetera?
Garbage truck probably 2 times a week. Other deliveries, multiple trucks on an everyday basis, delivering medical supplies, things of that nature.
And you didn't provide any turning templates for garbage trucks, delivery trucks?
I did not, because I did not prepare the plans. I don't know if Mr. Wazalowski did, but that's usually a site plan issue.
And as far as turning templates, you say there's a site plan issue. Is that your same answer for emergency vehicles?
Based on my quick review of the latest plan, I don't see any issue with getting a typical design vehicle in there, a garbage truck, a fire truck, what we would call an SU-30 single unit vehicle with a 30-foot wheelbase. I don't see an issue.
There's not going to be any conflicts with large fire trucks? Have you coordinated with the fire department about access to this site?
Again, usually the fire department would be something we'd do at site plan. But we would have to submit these plans at site plan to the fire department, to the emergency services people, and get their approval.
And at this time in your traffic studies, have you identified any mass transportation options in the area?
I don't think there are many. We have the North Jersey coastline a couple of miles away, but I'm not sure if there's a bus route on Red Hill Road.
Okay. So without knowing the tenants, based on your experience with medical office buildings of this nature, do you have any idea, based on demographics, clientele, the type of person that would or would not use mass transportation or would need mass transportation?
My traffic study assumes everybody would use a private automobile. It's a worst case scenario.
Now, you testified previously that 2/3 of the traffic exiting the facility is going to make a left, correct?
Correct.
And how did you come up with the number splitting it between 2/3 and 1/3?
Well, several reasons why I did it that way. Number one, looking at the population densities in the area and the access, of course, from the Parkway, it was my estimation that most traffic would arrive and depart from the north. The second reason why I did that was because I wanted to do a conservative analysis with respect to the number of left turns coming out of the side driveway. And by assuming that 2/3 would go to the north, 1/3 to the south, it probably, if anything, overestimated the number of left turns because, again, that's the critical movement that I wanted to make sure we had capacity for.
Now, when you did your gap analysis, and based on your experience with demographics of these types of sites, would there be a larger number of senior citizens that would use these medical buildings? And if so, do you take into account their reaction times when you do a gap analysis?
It depends on the types of physicians and medical users that are in the medical office buildings. There could be some that cater to the senior community, but there's no, to the best of my knowledge, unless Michelle knows something different, the ITE or any of our professional organizations do not have any factors that we can apply, for senior drivers.
Are you aware if ITE applies those factors when they come up with their estimates, studies, numbers?
Not sure I understand the question.
When ITE comes up with their different standards for different types of uses of property, are you aware if they ever take into consideration when analyzing a use of a property, if they take into question demographics, specifically in this type of situation, the age of the driver?
I haven't seen any published data from the ITE.
And when you did your last gap analysis, 3 to 4 o'clock you said was the busiest.
Correct.
Are you aware of what time the high school and middle school get out?
Probably a little bit earlier, but I'm not sure.
So if it was, and you didn't even start until 3 o'clock, correct?
Correct.
So had you started earlier, would you think you would have noticed any difference if both the high school and middle school were letting out?
Traffic volumes would have been lower on Red Hill Road, based on my experience. Everybody asks me the question, well, the school's let out at 1:45 or 2 o'clock. The thing is, there's very little commuter traffic on the road at that point in time, so I'm very confident that the overall traffic volumes would be lower, for example, between 2 and 3 o'clock.
Does gap perception change, whether it's light out or dark out?
In my opinion, it does, but again, because we've got so many multiple gaps well in excess of 8 seconds, it's not an issue in this case.
Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Ray.
Okay, thank you.
Any follow-up from the board before you?
Any board questions? Questions on the board?
Jason, I have a question, a couple of things.
Okay, Dimitri, go.
Some of these things will be for the engineer, but I've been listening here and I've been writing things down. Some of them may have to do with an architect if there's one available, so depending on what it is and who can answer it, that's what I'm going to say. So ramp, first of all, the handicap spots that we have in the front, the crosshair area, will those be ramped so that if a first aid responder has to come there, they can pull a stretcher right up a ramp, or is there going to be a curb there?
So Dimitri, why don't we wait till we get
That's
the
for
engineer
Mike,
back?
yeah.
Yeah, and, so.
Do you have
Mr.
any
Kaplan,
questions for the traffic study?
Yeah.
The gap study?
Well, I mean, it might be considered traffic. Balusters in front of the parking spaces in front of the building.
That's for Mike.
Engineer.
Okay.
Anything else, Dimitri, for the gap study?
No, that's it. We'll bring the engineer back.
Okay.
So before, Mr. Kaplan, before John leaves, do you have anything for our traffic engineer, or?
I do not.
Okay.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, do you want to come back up?
Would you like to open to the public for traffic, or?
We're trying to
You gotta be a while, you think?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you should.
Okay.
Get the traffic out of the way.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, at this point, we'll, if there's only questions
Of the traffic.
for the traffic study, do we have any people in the audience that would like to ask? Come on up. Is a microphone, do you want to share that microphone? Please state your name, slowly state your name and your address for the record, please.
Yes, hi, Christine Harry. I live at 12 Fox Hunt Road. My question is, I heard that the road would be potentially made wider to accommodate for a left turn lane. Where would that property, where would you get that space? Where would the property come from to widen the road?
The left turn lane hasn't been laid out yet, but it would likely take place both on our side of the road and from the opposite side of the road.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that issue? That's something the county
Yes.
puts into play because you
Absolutely.
guys don't do that. The county makes a decision.
The county has
on
designed,
widening.
yes, and the county has design standards, and if a left turn lane is warranted, they pretty much hold firm to their design standards.
Question for you then. If they take some property from your side of the road, would you have to push back the 2 lanes a little bit?
That's possible, and that would be something that would be adjusted at site plan. That's a possibility, yes.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the audience? From the public? Yes, come on up. Again, just state your name slowly and clearly and your address.
Regina Stephanie, 8 Fox Hunt Road. I have a question. The traffic study, did you do anything in the morning? Because I know
Yes.
back in September, like I take that road every single day, about 8 o'clock. Between 8 and 9, it's very, very crowded.
I'll give you some numbers because I did open to the raw traffic counts that we did for the original traffic study. The peak hour in the morning occurred between 8:15 and 9:15, basically what you're describing. Total of 1,554 cars in 2 directions on Red Hill Road. Peak hour in the afternoon, 1,882. 300 cars higher.
Okay, but your afternoon was 3 o'clock, not 2 o'clock, correct?
From 3 to 4, there was still almost 1,500 cars. It's higher.
Okay.
It is what it is. The afternoon peak hour is usually higher in most places.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public right now for the traffic gap study? Seeing none, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And Mike, if you can come back up, please. Thank you, Michelle.
Just wanted to appreciate it.
All right, so you have your microphone there, Mike?
I do.
Okay, great.
All right, Mr. Wozlowski, as you're aware, we're going to be going back to the beginning.
As expected.
So, as part of this application, you reviewed the Homedale Township ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Hey, John, just before you start, obviously, anything to do with the old plan that's been amended, we want to stick to the new plan, so we're not.
Absolutely.
doing old stuff, just for everyone's clarification.
Yeah. Are you aware of any other ordinance provisions that the applicant has not met that's not reflected in this plan?
Just gonna have to talk closer to the mic.
Speak up a little bit louder. Just speak louder.
Are there any ordinance provisions that the applicant will not meet that are not reflected in the plan?
Not that I can speak to of this at this time, understanding that as this plan evolves, should a subsequent site plan application be made, those things are more likely to be identified by either ourselves or the board's professionals.
With regard to this site, are you aware of any prior efforts or applications to develop this property?
I am aware of a prior application. I am not aware of the specifics of that application.
So you don't know when, what the outcome was?
No.
And you reviewed and prepared these plans, right? Including the most recent ones?
Yes.
And they're accurate and complete, correct?
I believe that's subjective.
What was the question?
If you believe that they're accurate and complete, it's your subjective thought.
For the purpose of the use variance plan, yes.
And you haven't seen any architectural plans, correct?
I believe at the first hearing, we had introduced an architectural exhibit.
The rendering of the exterior with the elevations?
Yes, I think that was the September 4th hearing.
Okay. Nothing internally?
No, those wouldn't have been prepared by myself.
So no landscape plan yet either, right?
That's correct.
No lighting plan yet?
Correct.
No stormwater management plan, correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to the geotechnicals that you did perform, none of them were performed in the basin areas, correct?
I don't believe any fell within the proposed basin areas, correct.
And you didn't prepare the geotechnical report, did you?
Correct. The report that I believe you're referencing would have been associated with the prior application.
When you say prior, you mean with the 4 buildings? The prior iteration of this or the prior application that you're not aware of?
Prior application that I'm not aware of.
Okay. And there's no environmental assessment report for this?
Not that I'm aware of.
And again, without any tenants, you don't know if there's going to be any noise, outdoor storage, any other additional lighting that might impact surrounding areas, correct?
Correct.
But it will increase the noise level, correct?
Some level of noise is to be anticipated, but it would be within ordinance tolerances, ordinance standards for noise in the municipality.
Would you consider this an environmentally sensitive area?
I would not.
Did you review a title report for this piece of property?
I did not.
Based on the survey that was submitted and any deeds that have been submitted for this property, are there any encumbrances on this property?
I don't believe so.
And there is a 25-foot easement on the tax map, correct? Are you aware of?
I don't believe I'm aware of that.
So you have no idea if it would have any effect on this application, correct?
I would need to review that information.
And are you aware of the traffic study that was prepared for this application? And we've discussed it. It's been discussed, the site triangle that's needed. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And that's at 490 Red Hill Road in Middletown.
I can't confirm if that's the exact address.
But you agree that this site triangle is necessary?
I do, but I would add, should right-of-way dedication to the county be provided on the property that's currently the subject of that site triangle application, given the size of that easement being so small, it may negate the need for it.
Okay. So a use variance is required for this application, correct?
Correct.
A height variance as well, correct?
Correct.
And you do need,
Can I just clarify? Yes. That I think, as testified or indicated by Kate, I don't think there's a height standard in this zone. And we're going to get back to that, I think, over
I
and
know.
over.
I don't want to sound like a broken record on because I know that Mike, you alluded to this during your initial testimony, but no, there are no bulk standards for this use in this zone. The bulk standards for this zone are only applicable to permitted uses such as single-family residences. So when we talk about height, when we talk about impervious coverage, these are really setbacks. We talk about these are really for comparative purposes only. So once again, the applicant's proposing 40 feet in height where 35 feet is permitted, but they do not technically require a variance for that. However, the board obviously can take the height and all of the site layout into account as part of their weighing of the D1 use variance, which has a higher standard of proof than any other variance, including C, D6, etc. So it's all part of the overall D1. So I don't want anyone to get stuck on things like, height variance, setback variance, impervious coverage. For example, like was testified to, the impervious coverage is being reduced. That's a good thing, but they technically do not need a variance for even being over by a little. So we'll get more into that when they provide planning testimony, but I just wanted to clarify that again.
Can you tell me what the height standard is for a residential area?
In this zone, it's 35 feet, I believe, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, let me just double check. I haven't even looked at it because it's not applicable. Sorry. Yes, the maximum building height for a single family or church, a library, public utilities, etc., is 35 feet. The applicant is proposing 40 feet.
I would clarify that that's 45 feet.
Sorry, 45 feet. I'm sorry.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Mike. Yes, and so there are other standards that apply to medical office buildings in other zones in the town. They also don't apply here, but that's another thing the board may want to look at for comparative purposes, but we'll wait until their planner goes forward to get to that.
Thank you, Kate.
So at the present time, the site drains from the rear to the front, correct, towards Red Hill Road?
Predominantly, yes.
And then when it gets to Red Hill Road, it goes down the road to where? Or would it get to Red Hill Road? Under
Yes,
this-
some runoff would get to Red Hill Road. There's some runoff that drains toward the road, toward the adjacent properties.
So what drains into the proposed biodetention facilities?
The proposed bioretention facilities would receive runoff from the proposed development.
So just the buildings and the parking areas, short of the pervious paving, I'm sorry.
Likely some of the pervious areas would also be routed to those basins.
So not all of the water from this site is being retained on site, correct?
That's likely.
And was there a soil permeability test done for the basins?
We had reviewed that with the prior application that I'm not familiar with.
So at this time, you're not aware of the soil type in the proposed bioretention facilities, correct?
I do have that information. I apologize. I thought I had the hydrologic soil group rating with me, but I do not appear to have that information.
And you didn't do any analysis of stormwater from other sites draining onto this site, correct?
No.
Any soil testing for the proposed parking lot areas?
No.
So without an environmental impact statement, any of the other reports that I just mentioned, You don't really know the environmental impact of this proposed development, do you?
We have not prepared an environmental impact statement. That being said, we don't consider this, as we had previously discussed, to be an environmentally sensitive site.
Did you do any analysis as to the groundwater flow of this site?
Personally, I did not, only that information which was available in the previous geotechnical investigation.
Now, when you say previous geotechnical investigation, what year is that?
I don't know.
Do you know what's changed on this site to now as opposed to what was there on the previous application?
I believe the home that was previously there is, I know it's since been demolished. I believe it may have been standing at the time of that application.
Anything else removed from the site, like trees?
It's possible, but I cannot speak to that.
So I'm assuming you didn't do any groundwater flow analysis on neighboring properties either?
No.
And you didn't determine the depth of the water table, correct?
Having reviewed that previous geotechnical report, that determined the depth to seasonal high to be approximately 6 feet. To clarify, when I say seasonal high, I mean seasonal high water table.
And when you say seasonal high, that's January through April, correct?
Typically.
And as you said, you didn't conduct these tests, correct?
That's right.
So the bioretention systems are not collecting 100% of the water, correct? It's just the driveways and the buildings.
They may not.
So are you aware of whether or not more stormwater is going to be leaving the site after this is possibly constructed or as it is now?
As part of our design, we're bound by both the municipal and the state's stormwater management rules with which we would comply.
So you don't know the answer to the question right now?
At this time, we have not performed a stormwater analysis.
The stormwater analysis that you did perform with regard to the 2 bioretention facilities, did you perform any analysis as to what happens if those systems fail?
No.
Gone over the septic and the changes that you made. Are there any potable wells over there in that vicinity that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you have an estimate of daily outflow or wastewater?
Generated by the buildings?
Correct.
Yes, that number is uh, 1,860 gallons per day per building.
So obviously, 1,860 goes to each tank, correct?
Yes.
With each respective leaching field, septic field, leaching field, correct?
Yes.
Have these newly proposed septic fields been tested?
No.
So at this time, you're not aware of the capacity of the septic fields as compared to the tanks, correct?
Correct.
And as you stated, there is no landscape architect, correct?
Correct.
Now, on this rendering before us right now, it's marked as A5. All of the landscaping on there, is that existing, proposed, or just hypothetical at this point?
We call it hypothetical or conceptual.
Are you aware of how many trees are going to have to come down for this proposed development?
I'm not.
Did you do a tree inventory of the site?
No.
Do you feel that you'll be removing fully grown trees?
It's possible.
Without an inventory, you have no idea the caliber of those trees, heights, age, drip line, canopy, anything like that?
Correct.
Are you aware right now how many trees are going to be required to be replaced based on the number you take down?
No.
And there was a brief discussion about the hot box and evergreen trees. Are you aware, you did suggest before that you do have a larger buffer now, specifically on the southeastern part of this property next to the residential. Are you have any idea right now what you'd be planning there?
A landscape plan has not been developed at this time.
Now, there was a substantial discussion in the geotechnical report about the suitability of the soil for development, correct?
I believe so.
And there was specifically statements in the report that this site will need to be over-excavated, correct?
I'm not familiar with the entirety of that report.
So right now, if it's being over-excavated, you really don't know what the limit of disturbance is at this time, correct?
No.
So you have no idea the impact of neighboring properties?
We would not disturb soils on adjacent properties.
Will you be disturbing soils close enough to neighboring properties that you can disturb the root system of the trees on neighboring properties?
I don't have that information.
And with the over-excavation of this site, do you have any idea right now how much soil will be removed from the site and how much soil will be brought into the site?
I'm not familiar with any over-excavation requirements or any cut-fill analysis.
So do you have any idea at this time, when you develop this site, what kind of grade changes there's going to be, if any?
No, a grading plan has not been developed.
So you have no idea of any cutting and filling that will take place, how deep they're going to be?
Correct.
And again, no lighting plan, correct?
Correct.
So you have no idea what kind of lighting there will be on this site and what impact it will have on neighboring properties, correct?
Correct.
But the neighborhood will be exposed, there will be lights in the parking lot, correct?
Yes.
No idea what type of lights?
Other than LED, no.
No idea the site poles, bollards?
No.
And with these proposed changes, you left the trash enclosure where it is, correct? That didn't move?
I may have been subject to one of the few shifts I had mentioned, but it's predominantly in the same location.
You say it may have shifted. Did it shift closer to the residential properties next door or further away?
Would have been a few feet closer.
Any idea what kind of negative effects that might have on a neighboring property?
No, I would reiterate that we are proposing a landscaping buffer and berming within that area that we've created.
And with regard to the location of the site, you don't think there's going to be any pedestrians accessing this site, correct?
No.
And there's only sidewalks along two edges of the parking area, correct?
Correct.
No sidewalks or safety walkways from the southeastern portion of the property, those parking spots. There's no walkway to get towards the buildings, correct?
Correct.
You ever observed any pedestrians on Red Hill Road?
Not that I can think of.
And has any construction sequencing been determined at this time?
No.
And I'm assuming you don't know if there's going to be any blasting required, anything like that in the development of this site?
I can't speak to that.
I apologize for not being as long as I thought I would be. But
Okay, thank you. We'll open up to the board. Do you have any? The board first, and then public, yeah. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I got a question. Where would be the entrance to the building across the street in Middletown? The Sloan Kettering building compared to your driveways here? Do you know? I mean, that's not shown on this diagram. We're saying there's no pedestrians, but would anybody park in one place and try to cross over to the other?
I don't want to speculate. I believe opposite our driveway is an entrance only to Sloan Kettering. I think it looks like their primary driveway is opposite the parkway.
Francine?
Know the site of this proposed development. There were lots of trees there. The roots are still there. The trees were knocked down, well, not cut down, but the roots are still there. I would assume the roots are still
Do you
would.
have the mic on? I can't hear her.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's talking.
I would assume the roots would still be absorbing water to not do runoff on adjacent properties. So was something done to see, because if you're gonna do construction on that land, you're gonna probably have to pull up those roots that are retaining water for storm. Is there an analysis gonna be done to make sure that when all those roots come up with all that construction, that stormwater runoff is gonna be different than it is currently on the site right now?
I think obviously with any development, the stormwater changes from what we say pre-development to post-development. But we account for all the requirements of, again, the municipal ordinance and the overarching state requirements that we always hold to, regardless of whether or not a state permit is required.
Concerned, because I know there's a lot of trees on that property, which might have been absorbing a lot of water.
And when we look at the surface coverage of a site, that's factored into our analysis.
Lori, any questions?
So a lot of the questions that you didn't seem to have answers to, concerned about environmental and what Francine was talking about, stormwater. Will that be followed up in stage 2 if we reach a stage 2, like a second phase of this?
Right, so the next step, should we obtain the use variance approval and choose to submit a site plan application, that application will be much more encompassing in terms of plans, reports, and detail.
Yeah, Dimitri, I'm sorry, I was gonna open up to the professionals, but I think you have a question or two, right?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Okay, go ahead.
In front of the parking spaces, there are approximately 23 of them in the front of the building. Is there balusters being placed there to protect the building from cars coming across?
So there's no bollards proposed. Currently, there's a 6-inch tall curb, and then where the ADA spaces are proposed, there are what we call curb or wheel stops. That would be in front of the space where we have depressed curb to serve the same purpose as the curb.
Okay, being on the squad, I've seen many occasions when vehicles jump that curb and hit the building. So I would suggest that balusters be considered at some point or another and be placed in between, in the middle of the parking spaces, all front of the building.
Yes, we could certainly consider that request.
Number 2, the handicap crosshair ramps. I presume they're ramps in order to allow wheelchairs and walkers to get up there.
Yes, there are, I believe, a pair of ramps that would be proposed here.
Okay. Then the buildings, going into the front of the buildings, based on the elevations, I saw steps. Can the grade be changed to eliminate steps so that a wheelchair or a walker or even a stretcher from the first aid squad could go straight into that building?
We currently don't show any steps from the sidewalks to the buildings.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the elevation of the buildings, and I see steps, about 4 or 5 of them, in front of both building accesses.
If you're speaking of the architectural plans, I had not developed
Yes,
those.
yes, I'm looking at the typical preliminary, typical elevation view of the medical office.
I think that's what he's referencing.
Okay, but yes, to clarify, the front entrances would certainly be ADA accessible. There's not intent to have stairs there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So the main entrances to each building would certainly be ADA accessible. There's not intent to have stairs
so
there.
there won't be any steps there. The grading will be adjusted to allow for flat access.
Yes.
Okay, now the next question I have may be something that requires an architect, but I'm going to say it anyway. Elevators. that are in the
Dimitri,
building.
just for the record, the witness said it would be ADA compliant. I'm not sure it'd be flat, but it'd be ADA compliant.
Correct.
Right.
Well, ADA compliant means that if somebody in a wheelchair can roll without steps.
That's fine, but it might be a ramp, I guess, right, or some other
If
feature.
necessary, yes.
Might not necessarily be a flat in. I just want you to understand that before you move on, in case you want to make
Well,
another
I
point.
guess in the next portion, if this goes through, we can address it again. And then whoever would handle this part, stretcher needs to be able to fit in an elevator to go up. So I don't know, I didn't see anything that shows that. I know we're on the first stage, and hopefully the second stage you'll talk about it. But if somebody's doing the drawings, let them consider that there's room for a stretcher to get in an elevator.
Yes, again, as part of any subsequent site plan application, we would submit complete architectural floor plans and elevations.
Okay, and lastly, I presume in the next section, if we get there, the landscaping plan will be submitted in detail with the berms, et cetera, and how it's going to look.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I have, Jason.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. Angela, do you have any questions? All right, at this point then, if there's no more further questions from the board, I'll open it up to the professionals, Kate and Mr. White.
I have nothing right now. Thanks.
Mike, you indicated that you have not done any soil testing in the septic areas nor in the bioretention basins.
Correct.
So should you have testing results come back that have a problem, you will have to change your design, correct?
Correct.
Whether you have to remove soil and fill it back in down to the groundwater table or come up with an alternate design, you're going to have to meet the flow reductions and water quality requirements because you are a major project and it may alter your design. That would bring you back to this board with an amended plan. And it may be at the site plan stage. So the plan may alter a little bit just to address those items because you'll have more information at that point in time. Because this is only conceptual at this time. I just want to make the board aware of that. So when if they come back.
Jason, I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Basically, if you end up getting bad test results for all the test pits and the soil borings, that the plan they come back with in possibly in stage 2, I guess we refer it to, for site plan approval, may look somewhat different than what the plan is right before the board now, because this is a concept. It hasn't really been developed all the way. I just want to make sure the board was aware of that.
Yes, and I will just add to that, I think we've discussed this, but typically a condition of approval as for bifurcated applications, if the board were to look favorably on this, is that the site plan looks substantially similar to the concept plan. So that means, if there were issues related to soil testing and things had to be moved around on the site where, maybe the driveway was flipped, the building sizes were changed, that would trigger a new D1 variance testimony. They would not, they would have to come back with something similar to this, and that's up to the board to decide, but substantially similar, typically means it pretty much looks like this with some, minor changes. But if anything were to happen that related to a major shift on the site, they would not just be able to come forward again for site plan approval. They would have to put on use variance testimony.
Thank you, Kate. If there's no more testimony from the professionals, we'll open this up to the public. Again, just raise your hand if you'd like to come forward and speak. Ask any questions directly to the engineer. Not seeing any. Oh, we have one. Okay, please come up. Just state your name again for the record. Can you borrow the microphone over there? Just switch your microphone so you can respond to her.
Regina Stephanie, 8 Fox Hunt Road. My question is, I have 3 questions. What is the hot box? Does it make a lot of noise? And is it large? Like, is it going to interfere with the neighbor?
So a hot box is the industry term we use to describe an above-ground heated enclosure. And New Jersey American Water, who's the provider here, requires that that be provided in certain instances where certain mechanical equipment can't be provided within a certain distance. Say the buildings are set too far back from the street. So we'd be providing that here, and it's an above-ground heated enclosure that houses some of the important mechanical equipment. It would be, again, screened because it's generally considered to be an unsightly feature.
Where is it being placed in adjacent to the house, like the property adjacent to it?
So we currently have that hot box situated toward the northeast corner of the site, so near the Parkway intersection with Red Hill Road.
Does it make a lot of noise?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, I just want to ask my question again because I don't think I quite followed it. Can you show me again on the map there, the drawings, where the old septic tanks were being planned and where you moved the 2 septic tanks to? Can you just show me that again?
Sure, so referring back to Exhibit A5. Referring back to Exhibit A5, the previous location of the 2 septic fields was adjacent to the southwest property line, so approximately, I'll say here and here.
Okay.
So we've taken those, and from the room we've created adjacent to the Parkway right-of-way,
Right.
they're now here and here.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. So right off the Parkway. Good.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Francine, do you have a question? Do you want to ask the question? Go ahead. It's right off the Parkway.
It goes in
So right, these larger rectangles here indicate the septic fields. The tanks aren't shown here. They would likely be one probably between the buildings that would feed septic tank B for building B, and then another would be similarly left of building A, feeding septic field A.
See, Francine, I had the same problem. I couldn't see the 2 very light. I saw the brown buildings. I was wondering where the septic tanks were, septic fields. Okay, that's good. That's helpful. Any more questions from the public? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Fury. Yeah.
Just, and I don't like to be redundant, but I just want to make it clear, Mike, a lot of the questions that were asked of you were, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. The reason you didn't know is not because you are not going to ever find those answers. The reason is because of a bifurcated application. Unless the board asks you to go beyond the concept plan, it's premature to do that type of investigation and that type of design work, correct?
Yes.
So just so the board and the public is clear, if this use variance is approved, can you just explain what you would need to do to determine how the stormwater management will work, how the septic will be designed, what type of investigation and design work would you need to do?
Sure, yes, specific to both the septic and stormwater. So there's what we call geotech infiltration. There's different tests that we do of the soil material itself to determine characteristics of the soil, the depths to the seasonal high water table, the infiltration rates of those soils, to make sure that the locations of our stormwater basins and the septic fields are suitable in those locations, and they can function based on the proposed design using the tested infiltration rates that we found. And to the point of, I believe, Mr. White, that should we have results that are unfavorable, that may require adjustments. But there's adjustments that there's regulations for us to design around those.
And as it relates to septic, the Board of Health would ultimately have to approve the septic design, is that correct?
Typically, yes. In the case of this, because of the size and the generation of the sewage, it would go through NJPDs and the state.
Right, so that would be NJDEP.
And I just want to follow up on that. So if there were, I know Kate, you had said that it's not going to be exactly the same exact site plan, but I would like, if we're going to stipulate that the two septic fields remain, that won't change in any possible application adjustment.
If they're moved from that side to the other side, the board can consider that a substantial change in the plan, which would require us to present D1 testimony all over again.
Okay.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly, because, you know, they're presenting this concept plan, it's not fully engineered, it's not fully detailed, but the board, you know, the applicant has put on testimony and they've said this is going to go here, and they've provided the basis for that. So something, you know, that could have especially an impact on a neighbor, or just really something that they've testified to being in a certain location, if that changes, the board really gets another crack at the whole application because the proofs will have substantially changed.
Okay.
And then another two follow-ups. As far as the stormwater management system, you've indicated that during your responses, but there are stormwater management regulations both by the township and the DEP, and you agreed to comply with both of those regulations, is that correct?
Yes.
And then finally, as it relates to tree removal, you will have to conduct a tree inventory. We will have to comply with the tree removal and tree replacement and/or payment ordinance of the town. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that analysis would also be done as part of the site plan design.
Yes.
Okay. That's all, Mr. Chair.
And just another follow-up, I know this is not concrete yet, we're just, you know, it's all conceptual. How much lighting will be going on that parking area? 10 lighting, LED light poles, like just curious about the potential light, quote-unquote, disturbance for that area.
Right, at this point, I would say that that's an appropriate estimate. Again, as part of a site plan application, we would conduct a lighting plan following review of your lighting ordinance to ensure that we comply with things such as light pole height, illumination at ground level, et cetera.
Okay. Any further questions from the board? I do want to talk about one more thing before we adjourn. But any other questions regarding?
I have no questions at this point regarding the engineering and the traffic. I do have a kind of, but it may be somewhat out of order. I have a bit of a concern considering I mean, there's two aspects of this. One, is this a desirable facility from the point of view of the overall area, having medical offices here? And it would be nice to know, in fact, that somebody at Sloan Kettering would say, look, we're busting at the seams, and in fact, doctors really would love to have offices across the street at this location. So I've heard testimony saying that, but I haven't heard, you know, any substantiation from anyone that this is the case. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about. In fact, that's probably the major thing. And then, of course, we all know you need to get the site triangle on the other side. But again, that question is probably not an engineering question or an architect's question. It's an overall, the question I have is more a market question. I mean, is this really?
So just briefly in response, not tonight, but at the next meeting, we have to present our planning testimony. That's our last professional, and I'll make sure she can address that question as part of her testimony. And she has a lot to address because of the D1 relief that's required, so she knows what she needs to do. And Kate will make sure she does.
Yes, I was about to say, thank you, Sal. Yes, Jean, you know, because we'll go over this more at the next meeting, and I'm happy to speak to the board, you know, before the planner goes on, we can talk about it on the record. But, you know, the proof for special reasons for granting a D1 variance is that the applicant has to show that the site is particularly suitable for the proposed use. And there's a number of ways that they can do that. So, you know, what you're saying kind of factors into that. It's one of several ways that it can be shown, but I think that the planner will address that kind of topic.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the board? Okay, so I would like to propose a site plan meeting, on-site meeting. Was that?
Site plan, just a site visit.
On-site meeting, yeah, to kind of like visualize where the layout of everything's going to be with different colored flags for obviously the buildings. Let's call those yellow flags. The septic fields, let's call those red flags. Blue flags for all the parking. And any, Dimitri, am I thinking about any other, maybe that where that,
You want-
that,
you wanna see the access point.
The access point, where the building is, that heated building, where that would be as well. What was the hot box? Hot box. You know, pick a color. Go ahead, Francine, go ahead. Exits and entrances, yeah, that, right there, that spot there. Am I missing anything you'd like to see when we go to the, and then we'll pick a date as well to go there and look at the site plan.
Do we do that before the planner speaks or after?
It's probably more engineering than planning, but whatever you guys want.
Yeah, it's up to the board. I think typically the board has gone mid-application rather than at the end, because, you know, really, as a planner, when we provide testimony, we're really supposed to be pulling together everything that's been presented so far. And that includes, you know, the board's questions, the public's questions, and most importantly, the testimony that's been given. So I think that would make sense there. Another thing I was going to say, maybe, and I'm not sure if this would be possible to do on the site, would maybe be to show, you know, the height of the berm, potentially. Just
Okay.
maybe not you know, you don't have to do it across the whole area, but maybe just like a mound in some way that would show kind of how that would function. Because I think that's an important change to this plan from prior iterations. The only thing, other thing I just want to say is that, you know, regarding the hot boxes, that it's come up tonight a lot, and it's kind of an interesting thing because it doesn't really come up in Homedale. I can't remember hearing about it in Homedale before, but I work in a few municipalities across the state, and I don't really know what the rhyme or reason is, but this frequently happens. They frequently are part of site plans. And the one thing I just want to caution the board is that the applicant can show they can screen it, they can have an ideal location, but to a certain extent, I believe this is at the mercy of the water company.
Okay.
So, you know, I think that's something that, you know, we'll touch on that. We can see how it goes, because I think it's going to be smaller than you're thinking. So not small, but it's when you get used to seeing them, you don't see them that often. But when you hear about it, it's kind of a unique feature. But yes, they are very common in some municipalities in some areas of the state.
I'd like to also propose, if there's any way, as that we could see how high these buildings would be. Because I'm concerned, this is a residential area. Most of the homes there are 2 stories. You're proposing a 3-story. So if there's any way to let us know how high that would look.
Yeah, I would also, Francine, if that's not possible that day, maybe they could do a balloon test, take photos, whatever is easier. Because yeah.
So, 3 things, Mr. Fieri. Could you ask the water company kind of now where they think this hot box should be placed? Just so, and then the second follow-up question is, when do you think you'll be able to have us come to the site? You give us an idea of it takes a week or 2 or maybe 3 weeks. We can kind of internally, off the record, figure out a day, whether it's a weekend day or a weekday.
Because I think we're gonna have to, if we could pick don't you have to notice if we don't pick the day today?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is
So
publicly noticed.
I think we have to live with whatever day.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about that now then.
You could also potentially carry it to the next hearing date, right, Marty? And then make
Oh,
the announcement.
so we're
then.
getting a request from the other attorney. Well, do you want to come up and speak? Why don't you just go on the record?
For the record, John Kaplan. I'm just not 100% of availability, so if we could announce that it'll be announced at the next meeting, I think that.
Well, we're gonna try to do it now, announce it, and if that works for your schedule, if not, we'll try to accommodate everyone's schedule, or yours at least if you can, or your offices.
Yes. All right.
I mean, I'm thinking.
A Saturday?
Yeah, I'm thinking a Saturday definitely, because
Okay.
because
You
it's
guys
too
want-
dark.
We talked about a weekend or something.
Yeah, I'm thinking a Saturday would be probably preferable.
This board has typically done
April
Saturday.
5th?
Yeah, what was that?
April 5th?
Let me just check everyone, can you check your calendars?
Where's your phone?
Dimitri, April.
You gotta also decide when they're coming back, obviously one just before they come back.
Okay. Dimitri, do you want to check your calendar for April 5th? Still got Dimitri?
You're not here?
She doesn't have her calendar.
Oh.
She doesn't use her phone. She uses her phone. Manual calendar. I only have it up to March.
The highlighted green area, so we can kind of get an idea.
Okay, that's a good, just speak it, yeah, request it.
Yeah, I was just mentioning whether we can get flagged for the perimeter, the highlighted area, just so we can kind of map out the distance between the landscaping to.
Yes, so, well, the perimeter, the buildings, the septic fields, the access points, exit and entrance, the parking area, and then the hot box. And the berm, the height of the berm.
Yeah, height, if there's any way for us to see how.
And it's some kind of like illustration of the height of the berm. I think April 5th will work for me. I just want to check with the rest of the board. Does anyone have a conflict that it won't work?
Right now it works.
Dimitri, can you hear us still? Is he still on?
No holidays.
He's good to go, okay. All right, so let's say April 5th? Okay.
You guys are.
And John,
Well, just south.
April 5th works for you?
Plenty of time for your engineer?
Okay.
Yeah. Gives enough time.
So John Kaplan, for the record, said yes, April 5th.
Let's pick a time.
11 a.m.? 11 a.m. on Saturday, April 5th, for a site plan meeting where we'll have flags for the perimeter of the property, different colored flags for the buildings, different colored flags for the septic fields, different colored flags for the entrance and exit, different colored flags for the parking area, and then again, we talked about an illustration of where the water company may put the hot box, and then we said the Burma.
And we'll
So
have
do you
a-
have all that? Do you have
Yeah,
all?
we have all
okay,
that, and
okay.
we'll have like a ski slope map that should, with the colors, so you'll know what each thing is, so you, because we have to limit communications too, we're not
Okay.
supposed to do much talking to each other during
Okay,
that
great.
process.
It's just for questions for the
Yeah.
board.
Where do we park?
Is there room to park?
At Memorial Sloan Kettering? Across the street? Yeah, that's what I would say.
We'll have an area cleared for parking.
Okay,
Okay.
I just want people to see. if-
Yeah.
So the public is aware of Saturday, April 5th at 11 a.m. for a site
Are you,
plan
is your
meeting?
client the owner of the property or contractor?
The owner's here, he's contracted,
So
I
we-
think they're they're together.
Okay, so just want to make sure the owner consents.
He's gonna unlock it, I'll bring a machine in there.
Perfect.
I'll
And-
cut some of the weeds down.
Perfect.
And then you can drive around the site.
And Marty, just for the public, this is a public meeting, but there is no public comment, correct?
Yep.
Yes. So everyone's welcome to join. You know, it's not really supposed to be a the board isn't really supposed, you know, the board speaks, you know, the public can watch, but it's not really supposed to be a conversation.
Right. They'll-
Questions.
They'll bring the, they'll bring
No
the
question.
comment. No, you'll ask questions if you have clarifications.
Yes.
But you come back here and then you'll
And
make
then
your
you talk
observations
about it,
on the
right.
record. Right.
Right.
And the public can do the same at that following hearing. Take notes.
Absolutely,
So,
photos, notes, anything.
on that point, let's talk about the next meeting, we're after April 5th.
Through the chair, I have a question. So this would be considered as a special meeting? Are we adding as a special meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
you're
so
gonna
that
be-
will be advertised.
It will be advertised.
Yes.
We've done these before in the last couple of years.
wanted to
Courtney and I
clarify.
can help you with that, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so the meeting, so there's a meeting right before that, April 2nd, but right now, the agenda looks clear, tell me if I'm wrong, Irina, for April 16th? So, what was that? Yeah, so if we have the site plan meeting on Saturday, April 5th, then 11 days later, we can discuss, you know, what we saw and ask questions at the April 16th meeting.
And I'm just, Our planner's in Jackson, so she has her phone with her to
Okay.
make sure, because we're going to need her at that meeting, so I'm
Okay.
just waiting for her to text me
Okay,
back.
sure, sure. John, April 16th work for you? Okay, great, great. Do we want to wait a little bit longer?
She's good.
Just
Yeah,
wait
She's
for
good.
Christine.
Yep,
She's good.
she's good, okay.
She's good?
So, all right, so I think we're firm. April 5th for the site plan meeting, 11 a.m. We'll have parking set up for everyone to safely park their cars and walk around the site plan with, like we always discuss the flags. And then questions, comments, further follow-up will be on April 16th. at
With
the
no
next-
further notice?
No further.
Without
further notice.
Without further
April
notice.
16th. Sal, your professionals will be here even though they're finished?
Yeah, you're-
You mentioned they might, so I want to clarify so everyone knows.
We'll,
Your
yes,
engineer will be here.
definitely be here.
All right.
All right.
Okay, we said, if no more comments from the board, are we, okay? If so, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, have a good night, everyone. Thank you for your patience.
All right, Sabrina, you want the green folder stack, you said? All right, she wants.
Yeah, Dimitri, we're hanging up.
I didn't mean. Everybody just give Irina these back.
Microphones off. Do we turn the microphones off?